I would like to start this video off by saying this video will be going over topics of depression and suicide. So if you are sensitive to those topics, please click off this video. Spongebob, a show that I'm sure we have all watched at least one episode from, especially if you're clicking on this video. Today's topic revolves around a quote-unquote lost episode of Spongebob titled Squidward's suicide, or better known as Red Mist, as a lot of people call it. I don't exactly remember how I came across this story when I was little, but I remember the story, and I'm pretty sure I found it by searching up stuff like Jeff the Killer and Slenderman in the YouTube search bar. I'm not really sure, but I'm still gonna read it. This one's definitely gonna be a shorter one than usual. I'm pretty sure it says the estimated reading time's like 7 minutes, so it's gonna be more closer to around the length of Slenderman rather than Sonic EXE or Jeff the Killer. Jeff the Killer was so bad. Check out my other videos on this topic, and since this video is short, I'm going to do my best to actually edit it this time. Yay! Anyways, let's get into some brief history. Searching up for the history of this creepypasta, like who created it, it doesn't say who created it. It was written by an unknown author. So that's pretty interesting. This story released on September 1st, 2010. So that's when it was added to creepypasta.com. Now, into the actual story. I just want to start off by saying if you want an answer at the end, prepare to be disappointed. There just isn't one. I was an intern at Nickelodeon Studios for a year in 2005 for my degree in animation. It wasn't paid, of course, most internships aren't, but it did have some perks beyond education. To adults, it might not seem like a big one, but most kids at the time would go crazy for it. Now, since I work directly with the editors and animators, I got to view the new episodes days before they aired. I'll get right to it without giving too many unnecessary details. They had very recently made the SpongeBob movie, and the entire staff was somewhat sapped of creativity, so it took them longer to start up the season. But the delay lasted longer for more upsetting reasons. There was a problem with the Series 4 premiere that set everyone and everything back for several months. Me and my two other interns were in the editing room along with the lead animators and sound editors for the final cut. We received the copy that was supposed to be Fear of a Krabby Patty and gathered around the screen to watch. Now, given that it isn't final yet, animators often put up a mock title card, sort of an inside joke for us, with phony, oftentimes lewd titles. I'm not sure if that's a word. Such as how the Hokey Pokey doesn't work instead of Rockabye Bevalve when SpongeBob and Patrick adopt a sea scallop. Nothing particularly funny but work-related chuckles. So when we saw the title card, Squidward, we didn't think it more of a joke. One of the interns did a small throat laugh at it. The happy-go-lucky music plays as is normal. The story begins with Squidward practicing his clarinet, hitting a few sour notes like normal. We hear SpongeBob laughing outside, and Squidward stops, yelling at him to keep it down as he has a concert that night and needs to practice. SpongeBob says okay and goes to see Sandy with Patrick. The bubble splash screen comes up, and we see the ending of Squidward's concert. This is when things began to seem off. Well, playing a few frames repeat themselves, but the sound doesn't. At this point, sound is synced up with animation, so yes, that's not common. But when he stops playing, the sound finishes as if the skip never happened. There is slight murmuring in the crowd before they begin to boo him. Not normal cartoon booing that is common in the show, but you could very clearly hear malice in it. It's kind of goofy, but Squidward is in full frame and looks visibly afraid. The shot goes to the crowd, with SpongeBob in center frame, and he too is booing, very much unlike him. That isn't the oddest thing, though. What is odd is everyone had hyper-realistic eyes, very detailed. Alright, this is 2 creepypastas in a row that bring up hyper-realistic. We gotta start making a counter. I'll do a counter in the next video. Unless it does it a lot in this one, I'll add a counter. Clearly not shots of real people's eyes, but something a bit more real than CGI. The pupils were red. Some of us looked at each other, obviously confused, but since we weren't the writers, we didn't question its appeal to children yet. The shot goes to Squidward sitting on the edge of his bed, looking very forlorn. The view out of his porthole window is of a night sky, so it isn't very long after the concert. The unsettling part is at this point there is no sound. Literally no sound. Not even the feedback from the speakers in the room. It's as if the speakers were turned off, though their status showed them working perfectly. He just sat there, blinking, in this silence for about 30 seconds. Then he started to sob softly. Little side note, whenever a creepypasta gives specific time lengths, it's like really annoying because I don't think he would be paying attention to that to know. Anyways, then he started to sob softly. He put his hands, tentacles, over his eyes and cried quietly for a full minute more, all the while a sound in the background very slowly growing from nothing to barely audible. It sounded like a slight breeze through a forest. The screen slowly begins to zoom in on his face. By slow, I mean it's only noticeable if you look at shots 10 seconds apart, side by side. How would you do that? His sobbing gets louder, more full of hurt and anger. The screen then twitches a bit, as if it twists in on itself for a split second, then goes back to normal. The wind through the trees sound gets slowly louder and more severe, as if a storm is brewing somewhere. The eerie part is this sound, and Squidward's sobbing sounded real, as if the sound wasn't coming from the speakers, but as if the speakers were holes the sound was coming through the other side. As good a sound as the studio likes to have, they don't purchase the equipment to be that good to produce sound of that quality. Below the sound of the wind and sobbing, very faint, something sounded like laughing. It came at odd intervals and never lasted more than a second, so you had a hard time pinning it. We watched the show twice, so pardon me if things sound too specific, but I've had time to think about them. Why would you watch it twice? After 30 seconds of this, the screen blurred and twitched violently, and something flashed over the screen, as if a single frame was replaced. The lead animation editor paused and rewound frame by frame. What we saw was horrible. It was a still photo of a dead child. He couldn't have been more than 6. The face was mangled and bloodied, one eye dangling over his upturned face, popped. He was naked down to his underwear, his stomach crudely cut open and his entrails laying beside him. That's 2 stories in a row mentioning entrails, and I don't even know what that word means. He was laying on some pavement that was probably a road. The most upsetting part was that there was a shadow of the photographer. There was no crime tape, no evidence tags or markers, and the angle was completely off for a shot designed to be evidence. It would seem the photographer was the person responsible for the child's death. We were of course mortified, but pressed on, hoping that was just a sick joke. The screen flipped back to Squidward, still sobbing, louder than before, in half body and frame. There was now what appeared to be blood running down from his face, from his eyes. The blood was also done in a hyper-realistic style. Oh my god. Looking as if you touched it, you get blood on your fingers. The wind sounded now as if there were a gale blowing through the forest. There were even the snapping sounds of branches. The laughing, a deep baritone lasting at longer intervals and coming more frequently. After about 20 seconds, the screen again twisted and showed a single-frame photo. The editor was reluctant to go back. We all were, but he knew he had to. This time, the photo was that of what appeared to be a little girl, no other than the first child. She was lying on her stomach, her barrettes in a pool of blood next to her. Her left eye was too popped out and popped. Her left eye was too popped out and popped. Her left eye was too popped out and popped, naked except for her underpants. Her entrails were piled up on top of her, above another crude cut along her back. Again, the body was on the straight, and the photographer's shadow was visible, very similar in size and shape to the first. I had to choke back vomit, and one intern, the only female in the room, ran out. The show resumed. Why would you have to say that it was the only female in the room? That just sounds sexist in a way. About 5 seconds after the second photo played, Squidward went silent, as did all sound, like it was when the scene started. He put his tentacles down and his eyes were now done in hyper-realism like the others were in the beginning of the episode. They were bleeding, bloodshot, pulsating. He just stared at the screen as if watching the viewer. After about 10 seconds, he started sobbing, this time not covering his eyes. The sound was piercing and loud, and most fear-inducing of all as this sobbing was mixed with screams. Tears and blood were dripping down his face at a heavy rate. The wind sound came back, and so did the deep-voiced laughing. And this time, the still photo lasted for a good 5 frames. How would you know the exact number of frames? Even if you watched it twice, you wouldn't know the exact amount of time or the exact amount of frames. That's what I have wrong with this story. That's what I dislike about it. The animator was able to stop it on the 4th and backed up. This time the photo was of a boy, about the same age, but this time the scene was different. The entrails. Again, the entrails were just being pulled out from a stomach wound by a large hand. The right eye popped and dangling, blood trickling down it. Oh my god. I never stuttered a P. That's weird. The animator proceeded. It was hard to believe, but the next one was different, but we couldn't tell what. He went on to the next same thing. He went back to the first and played them quicker, and I lost it. I vomited on the floor. The animating and sound editors gasping at the screen. The 5 frames were not as if they were 5 different photos. They were played out as if the frames were from a video. We saw the hand slowly lift out the guts. We saw the kid's eyes focus on it. We even saw 2 frames of the kid beginning to blink. The lead sound editor told us to stop. He had to call in the creator to see this. Mr. Hillenberg arrived within about 15 minutes. He's confused as to why he was called down there, so the editor just continued the episode. Once a few frames were shown, all screaming, all sound again stopped. Squidward was just staring at the viewer, full frame of the face, for about 3 seconds. The shot quickly panned out, and that deep voice said, "Do it." And we see it in Squidward's hands, a shotgun. He immediately puts the gun in his mouth and pulls the trigger. Realistic blood and brain matter splatters the wall behind him and his bed, and he flies back with the force. The last 5 seconds of this episode show his body on the bed, on his side, one eye dangling on what's left of his head above the floor, staring blankly at it. Then the episode ends. Mr. Hillenberg is obviously angry at this. He demanded to know what the hell was going on. Most people left the room at this point, so it was just a handful of us to watch it again. Viewing the episode twice only served to imprint the entirety of it in my mind and caused me horrible nightmares. I'm sorry I stayed. The only theory we could think of was the file was edited by someone in the chain from the drawing studio to here. The CTO was called in to analyze when it happened. The analysis of the file did show it was edited over by new material. However, the timestamp of it was a mere 24 seconds before we began viewing it. All equipment involved was examined for foreign software and hardware as well as glitches, as if the timestamp may have glitched and showed the wrong time, but everything checked out fine. We don't know what happened, and to this day, nobody does. There was an investigation into the nature of the photos, but nothing came of it. No child scene was identified, and no clues were gathered from the data involved, nor physical clues in the photos. I never believed in unexplainable phenomena before, but now that I have something happen and can't prove anything about it beyond anecdotal evidence, I think twice about things. Now on to reflection. As a child, the story didn't affect me much as I had already been exposed to stories such as Sonic EXE, Slenderman, I'm pretty sure Tiki Toby, Jeff the Killer, Jane the Killer, and a couple others. This one didn't scare me that much. I was already pretty much desensitized to this sort of thing, but it did scare me a little bit. This story didn't really affect the world that much, but it made its way into a SpongeBob episode, the episode being SpongeBob in Random Land. This caused a whole bunch of viewers to be upset because this technically makes Squidward's canon and just as an alternate reality in a way. I will show a picture on screen, and and this scene was later edited out of some airings and replaced with like baby Squidward. I will show before and after the replacement on the screen here, but you can definitely see the resemblance to Red Mist Squidward in the first image. Yeah, and that's one reason why the episode's popular. One of the reasons. This episode affected the creepypasta community because it, again, boosted lost episodes. One of the worst creepypasta genre, and almost all of them have hyper-realistic in them. It's so sickeningly annoying. But that's beside the point. Was it scary then? No, not really. Is it scary now? No, not really. What it means to me? The story means nothing to me. I do not like this story. It's a terrible story. It never meant much to me. Does it hold up? No. It is terrible. Hyper-realistic is cringe. It used to be scary then. Now, on to the tier list. Alright, time for the tier list. I really like the tier list part. It's fun for me. Alright, so Squidward's, I'm not gonna reverse it this time, so let's just call it Red Mist. So, Red Mist, I hated the writing on this. It could have done better, and they could have axed the whole hyper-realistic thing. And I feel like the dead children and in explicit detail was really unnecessary and makes me worry about the individual who wrote the story. So, I gotta, and it never really meant anything to me. I gotta give this one a C. The only reason Jeff the Killer isn't in C is because his writing is arguably like the worst I've read so far. It's funny too. I laughed so many times on that video, but the reason that he isn't in C is because he actually scared me as a child. He affected like a lot of stuff, especially in the Roblox community. He actually had some level of importance to me, at least. I'm just not a fan of Squidward's Red Mist. I'm not a fan of Red Mist. Gotta be honest. Never was, still not.